Okay. So do you have any air defense, my friend? Or no? Oof. Hey guys, Waifugate here, bringing you another deck tech. Today we'll tackle the Bant flash list featured in my last stream. If you're interested in the list, the description of all of that stuff can be found below the YouTube video, like including the deck list, the stream, all of that stuff, the other lists we've been using. But most importantly, this list will be down below. So starting off with the deck, it's built for best of 3. What our goals are, we're trying to push card advantage through Explorer, Hydroid Crassus, Vivian, Champion of the Wild, and sometimes Teferi Time Raveler. He doesn't always draw us a lot of cards. Sometimes he dies, but he can provide advantage, right? So it's good to include him. The Explorer creatures allow us to run slightly less lands than normal. We run 25, and can oftentimes lead to huge Crassus because we just don't miss our land drops. This deck also taxes the opponent's mana because of Teferi, forcing the opponent to cast everything at sorcery speed, on their own turn, and they can't interact with us on our turn, so we're able to, resolve planeswalkers a little easier, play 2 or 3 creatures at the end of their turn. It's really neat. It's nice. It's interactive. It's good. Not interactive for them, of course, but besides the point. So, end of turn Crassus, super good. Shalai can interrupt people. Like if you flash in Shalai here in response to a Vraska's Contempt on your Vivian, you basically counterspell it without having a Mystic, which is really cool. Very neat and interactive. It's good. Normally with me, I need interaction with my opponent, so normal aggro lists don't do it for me. Mono red, maybe I can Lightning Strike a Planeswalker. It's not good enough for me. I want to be able to draw cards. I want to be able to respond, and this list has been a perfect fit for that. So I've been enjoying it a lot. Going into our matchups and stuff, since this is best of 3, we have a few bad matchups, but it tackles, I think for the most part, most of the current meta. So to go into control, because you're usually worried about a board wipe, when you're playing an aggro deck, we have some responses to that main board without even game 1. We don't have to sideboard it. That's what usually main deck, main board means, right? Some nice redundancy. Anyway, so we have Frilled Mystic to respond to board wipes, and we also have Vivian, which plays around board wipes. If our opponent board wipes us, we can simply flash in a Jadelight Ranger, attack any planeswalkers that they might have, like if they had played a Teferi or something and we couldn't quite get in on it, stuff like that. It's nice, right? It's good. And sometimes we can even prevent the board wipe from ever happening in the first place with a Frilled Mystic. It's also another nice thing. Nice interactions. We also have interactions with Deputy of Detention, being able to answer planeswalkers potentially, even if it's just for a turn to stop an ultimate. We can stop, maybe search for Azcanta. It's very hard to protect this against control though, because they have so many creature removal spells, right? But it can interrupt stuff and reset things, so that's nice. It's it's not bad. So we also recover from board wipes by Vivianing a, that's totally a word, a Hydroid Crassus at the end of the turn after our opponent board wipes us. And if we still have Vivian out, we can still flash. And Teferi makes it really hard for our opponent to counter Crassus, and they can't cast down end of turn either. So it really provides a lot of weird pressure. Like Esper, I think Esper is not a bad matchup. I'd say we're probably favored 60%. Grixis, on the other hand, is a little harder to deal with because they have so many pesky creatures and planeswalkers. We struggle answering both sides of the fence. We're mostly teched for Nexus main board in regards to control. So Grixis, sideboard options, we have, I don't want to go too much into the sideboard options because we have a section for that in a little bit. But Harpooners are really good against Grixis, and Thieves, that's part of Grixis. It's also good for Esper sideboards if you think they're bringing in Thieves. Vivian's also good against Thieves because reach. So we even have answers to, I didn't even realize that we had answers until I talked through it, to Nicol Bolas main board with the plus here, and we can block with a Jadelight Ranger if it got lucky, right? A lucky Jadelight Ranger, a Wild Growth Walker. a Knight of Autumn, a Shalai. Shalai can block it anyway, but you know what I mean, like God Eternal even, like blocking if we can somehow pump this with like a Shalai. It's just super nice. We have a lot of interaction. We can blow up Search with Knight. A lot of Grixis doesn't run Search, though. I haven't really seen that, but you know, maybe Disinformation Campaign, stuff like that. We have a lot of interaction there. We'd also Deputy Bolus, which is scary. Only do that if you can protect it. Only Deputy the Planeswalkers if you can protect it, or if you just need to reset for an ulti. Same thing with Esper. You know, you want to use this pretty carefully against control. It's very risky. Only use it when you absolutely need to. If you've got Teferi, that's sort of protection too, because you can flash in Deputy end of turn, and then maybe protect it with a Frilled Mystic. And the Frilled Mystic is really cool too, because we can use Time Raveler to bounce our own Mystic to counterspell. That's something I should have gone over in the first section, but here it is now with you. Like, at least I didn't miss the point completely. Same thing with Deputy. If you've already bounced tokens with this, you can Deputy. You can bounce Deputy back to your hand, play Deputy again, even at flash speed potentially. There's so much you can do with this deck with Teferi Time Raveler. Shalai can also protect Deputy. They'd have to have a board wipe, and Soot's not good enough. Well, Soot can still get to him, but you know, you have to play with what you have, and your sideboard will be kind to you. A lot of good things in your sideboard like this for control. This makes it so you don't have to discard or sack things. That pesky Angrass Rampage Man, 2 mana, but this answers it. Sometimes they'll cast it anyway, not realizing that they can't make you discard that thing that they wanted to Thought Erasure, or make you sack that Shalai with that Rampage. It won't happen. We'll protect you sometimes. I'm not sold on her though. She might be a different card. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the control matchup. You have some options. You have some main board tech against them. Just play the best you can. Don't overextend unless you absolutely think that you can handle it with, like, you've got the Time Raveler out and you don't think they can respond to you, you know. Just try to feel it out, get a feel for it. The more you play with this deck, the more reps. I'm still learning it. But you'll learn when to extend, when not to, when to hold back. And you'll get the hang of it. So Nexus of Fate, that's another, like, I think we're favored. No, it's crazy, but we've got 3 Knights, which can answer as Kantas early. We've got Deputies that can answer as Kantas. They have Blast Zone. You have to watch out for Blast Zone. It's going to get you. That's the biggest counter to our deck, is the Blast Zone. It's really hard to play around it since a lot of our stuff is 2 or 3 CMC. It's basically a board wipe for us. But if you can punch through that, if you can punch through the first Blast Zone, you should be okay. That's the hardest thing. Is Blast Zone. You have to conquer the Blast Zone. Don't commit too many things of the same CMC if they have a Blast Zone, or you think that they can play a Blast Zone, get it to the right number and crack it, like with Wilderness or something else. That is something that Teferi the Time Raveler does not protect you from. Normally, you don't mind your opponent trying to, you know, resolve Wilderness because they can't do anything at instant speed. They won't be able to. But with Blast Zone, they can untap, tap Blast Zone, and blow everything up, so it's rough. It's tough. But if you can fight through the Blast Zone, you're good. Like, this deck main board, you should probably win game 1, because they're not expecting the amount of threats that we can punch out. And then sideboard, you have a lot of options. We'll go over that too. We'll go over that later in the sideboard options. But, like, you know, Veto's are just good, you know, and Tamiyo's decent. Probably not bring her in, though. Probably just Veto's, honestly, to just interrupt them and just play with what you have in the main board. Red's like an even matchup, I think. I think we have a good chance because we have 2 Wild Growth and the Explore package. Try not to overextend with Wild Growth. Don't let this be your first 2-drop of the turn if you can avoid it. If you can throw a Growth Chamber out first and save Wild Growth Walker for a turn 4 play with Walker and Branch Walker, do that. Or if you have Branch Walker, Wild Growth, and Jade Light, play Branch Walker first, then play, you know, Wild Growth after that if you think you can get the Jade Light off. But try to save an Explore creature for the same turn. Wait until they're tapped out, maybe to Teferi Time Raveler. The moons align and you can somehow resolve Teferi without it dying, without needing to use his -3 to die to a Chain Whirler. You can potentially make it so your opponent can't respond to Wild Growth Walker, and you can give it the Explore it needs to get out of blast range. Lava Coil's going to hurt coming out of the sideboard, but you can still manage with our sideboard too. Like we have Lyras, which just auto win and such. So, you know, you're pretty favored against red. Knight of Autumns also help versus Frenzy, versus Flame the Keld. Don't always get baited into gaining the 4 life. That's like the last measure. It's oftentimes better to give it the +2 counters, right? The 2/1/1 counters, because then they're required to use a Wizard's Lightning on it instead of a Shock or a Chain Whirler while they develop their board on top of just answering your board state. It's not what you want. You want to make them use those Wizard's Lightnings on this, on, you know, Branch Walker, on Jade Light, instead of on Walker, instead of on Deputy that could answer something else too. You know, like there's so much depth to this deck, especially with being able to flash in creatures. Your opponent's going to have a hard time keeping up with it. You have to have a decent hand. Shalai is also great main board, especially since you, like, let's say you're at like 3 life, right? Your opponent goes to lightning strike you. You can flash in Shalai if you have the Vivian up, and that lightning bolt, you countered it because they can no longer target your face. This even counters Banefire. Counters. It doesn't really counter, but you know what I mean. They no longer have a target for it. It's awesome. So, you know, use those tools to your advantage. Try to make them exhaust their resources on creatures. Growth Chamber is probably not going to adapt this game. If it does, it's a bonus. But this guy's just cannon fodder in this matchup, basically, to protect your other dudes. So just try to keep that in mind as you're moving forward with the deck, as you're practicing. You know, everything else can help. Hydra draw, gain life, good versus red, right? Life gain, good. This guy can just take over the board. You can sideboard him out. It might be good too, but he can also fight Chain Whirlers. It's fine. Like, you have to feel it out, man. But if anything, you really want to make room for the 2 Lyras. Maybe even Time Wipes. Those could be good against red too. Probably not, but probably just the Lyras and the Wild Growths coming in. You might want to sideboard out the Growth Chambers to make room for the 2 growth, for the 2 for the 2 walkers, and then the 2 Lyras. Maybe that's the sideboard. I don't know the specifics. I'm still testing it. But if anything, red is an even matchup, and it gets better after the sideboard because they just can't answer Lyra and Shalai together. There's no way. Mono white, I think we're more favored than we are for the red matchup because we have deputies and they don't have a lot of answers to that. If they use Conclave on your deputy to get back their thing, you can use Knight of Autumn to blow up their Conclave, getting back your deputy and wiping out their tokens again, wiping out whatever you need to. It's good. So that's fine, you know. And yeah, and like Teferi can be really good bouncing a token, bouncing you know, a like something that we can't really interact with a lot. Like maybe it's too big of a creature and we can't handle it yet. We can bounce it and then maybe counter it with a Mystic, something like that. We have a lot of options. This thing's really good against mono white too. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty good. So I think mono white we're favored in. You just got to use your deputy as well, and you know, flashing in a deputy end of turn can just win you the game. Like they can't really respond to it, and then you can swing out or have a counter spell. It's just so versatile. It's so good. I think I think with their sideboard, if they're blue white, we're a little unfavored. Not a lot, but they can interact with our planeswalkers, so it's bad. You know, we don't like that, but you can make adjustments too, you know. It's not always black and white. You can just adapt. You can do some stuff that's really specific. But like, you know, if these cards, if you're not sideboarding in Time Wipes, for example, replace it with something else. You know, if Tamiyo is just not doing it for you, replace it with something else. This isn't set in stone. This is just what I have from one day of playtesting. But I love the list so far, and we're going to keep going. So this isn't like a 40-minute video. Gruul, our worst matchup, pretty sure. Rekindling Phoenix, what do we have main board against it? Deputy, it gets lightning striked, right? It's not good. We have Teferi, we can bounce, counter it, maybe with Mystics. We can go bigger than it sometimes with Shalai. You know, if we can pump our creatures enough. We can give some of our creatures reach with Vivian. That's helpful. Like a Jade Light Ranger could block it, and then we could potentially deputy the egg. The stars have to align, but we can deal with it. We can go bigger, we can go wider than Gruul sometimes, especially with growth chambers and stuff. It's not too bad. And coming out of the sideboard, I don't like to touch too much because that's another section. But we've got Lyras, they just block them. Just block it. It's fine. Harpooners can be okay if you think they have Hellkites as well. Because you can Harpooner the Phoenix, so you can flash it in, right? And then you can Deputy. You can either flash that in, or you could just play Deputy on your own turn, right? If Vivian ends up dying, and then you can exile the token again. Stuff like that. That's super nice. Or you can just protect your tokens, your deputies with Shalai. You know, if you just deputy the Phoenix and you have a Shalai out, they have to have a lava coil for that Shalai, and then something to kill the deputy too. Like, you just keep demanding answers just like you do against red. Just keep demanding them, and eventually you might be able to outgrind them with like Vivian and Teferi drawing you cards and just exploring. And one Hydroid Crassus could just seal away the game, you know? Like, just imagine drawing 6 cards and having a 6/6 on the field, or a 12. That would be a 12/12, right? No, I don't know. I'm bad at math. Just ignore that. It's good. I know. Nice card advantage. You get to draw. Big flyer. It's also an answer to Phoenix, right? I totally remembered to include that in the first Phoenix thing. It's good. So moving along, big red vines, pretty much like red, except that, and this is kind of a bad matchup. The green can be pretty troublesome if they are splashing for something, like Spellbreakers and whatnot. Those are kind of hard for us to deal with a little bit, just because their body is so big. 4/4 is hard to deal with. We can block up with a Growth Chamber or a super souped up Jade Light, but it's kind of hard to answer. And if they misidentify our deck as, like, you know, a Nexus list or a Reclamation list, and they bring in Cindervines because they think that it'll matter, we have Knight of Autumn, so it doesn't really matter. They don't really have a lot of sideboard options against us, really. They can just be more grindy than the regular red deck, so just watch for that. Sultai midrange. So you remember when I said that Gruul was our worst matchup? This one is also our worst matchup. You oftentimes struggle to answer Planeswalkers. They can kill deputies pretty easy with like a cast down. It's really easy for them to answer stuff on our side. Hostage taker's hard to deal with. If they hostage taker our Knight of Autumn, and, like, you know, it's just, or hostage taker our Shalai, like, it's sad, man. It's hard to deal with since we don't have a lot of interaction with creatures. Our only interaction with creatures is something they can take over and interact with our creatures again. We can't always deal with that. We have to really have timely mystics in this matchup, otherwise we can't really win. Some considerations to fight it if you're running into a lot of hostage takers. You can have Tristani mainboard or sideboard. This might take the place of God Eternal, maybe one of the mystics. It's pretty rough. It's tough for sure. But you know, you can kind of get through it. You can adjust. If Sultai mid becomes really popular, just adjust the sideboard or the main board to it, you know? It's just what you do. Right now I'm fighting more Nexus, more Esper, more you know, just aggro lists in general, like Gruul and stuff, that I'm kind of, you know, adjusting my sideboard for those matchups, my main board for those matchups, instead of stuff that I haven't really seen a lot of. If I see more of Sultai, I'll adjust for it. Like Tristani being the biggest one. And that's pretty much all of the meta right now that I can think of. Stuff that needs to be covered. In regards to actual sideboarding, like red, we kind of went over it. This is just a quick recap. If you already know what I've said about the sideboards, just skip this part video. Against red, bring in 2 Lyras, 2 Wild Growth, potentially side out Growth Chambers for that. You know, Growth Chamber is really good because it can block Chain Whirler, but oftentimes it's probably not going to make it. It's also fodder, so maybe you take out something like maybe 1 Mystic, maybe the God Eternal, whatever you feel is necessary, but make sure that you get the other 2 Walkers and the Lyras in, because that's what they're there for. That's like the only thing they're there for almost, aside from the Rekindling Phoenix thing with Gruul. Sultai, if they're running a lot of flyers, bring in Harpooners. If they're running really, really heavy Planeswalkers, and you think that they're going to make you discard, you can do a combination of like 2 Vetoes and 2 Tamios potentially, if you think they're just going to make you discard a bunch. you can include this. Time Wipe might also be good in that matchup, because then you could take the whole board state onto your side again after you bounce like a Mystic or something. You can even do this on their turn. If you +1 your Teferi Time Raveler, imagine the board state if that happens. Like, imagine the outcome, you just +1. Yeah, it's your turn, man. And then after they cast something, maybe they cast something to get their Wild Growth Explorer bigger, or they Hostage Taker one of your dudes. That's the best. Let's talk about the best. And this is being really specific. Try to speed things up, but just savor this with me for a second. So Hostage Taker, they grab your Knight of Autumn, whatever. It doesn't matter. They grab something. They grab your Shalai, because that's the only thing it can grab. You, in response to combat, do Time Wipe, and you bounce your Crassus back to your hand. Okay? And now all the creatures die. Your Shalai comes back into play. They can't Thought Erasure you. They thought they could, but they can't. You can do this in response to the Thought Erasure. Okay? They Thought Erasure you before combat. After they take your Shalai. That's what they try to do. And in response to the Thought Erasure, you wipe the board. You stop the Thought Erasure because Shalai comes back. It's insane. It's dumb. It's like, it could blow them out. Maybe I'm overselling it. Could just be good because they could go wider than you. It also deals with Carnage Tyrant, okay, which is a problem with Sultai midrange sometimes. So that's another point to bring in Time Wipe. I don't know what you'd really sideboard out, though. It's a tough call. I'm gonna have to work that out. Probably trim maybe Crassus by 1. Probably not. Probably Knights, because they're probably bad. They don't really have enchantments unless they're running Citadel. So if they're running Citadel, keep these in. If not, you can take them out for Time Wipe or something else. So yeah, there we go. So let's Sultai. Esper, you're probably just going to sideboard out like some slower stuff, like the God here is probably just going to get answered. This could be really good, but you probably just sideboard out, you know, I don't really know. Probably the Walkers, 2 Walkers for vetoes, maybe. Some vetoes. Maybe Tamiyo if you could find room. Like, just find some combination of these that you're comfortable with and sideboard out some other stuff that's not being too useful. Like Wild Growth Walkers for sure. Maybe trim a Jade Light, maybe trim, you know, Shalai is really good because it stops discard too. And it pumps, so it's hard. It's hard to choose. Maybe 1 Hydroid because it's a little slow. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, just include some number of Dovin's DeVitos and or Tamiyo there to stop the Thought Erasures. Grixis, same thing. If they have flying creatures like Thief of Sanity, if you think they're going to bring them in, if they're going to bring in Nicol Bolas the Ravager, you know, just blow him up with Harpooner. He's really good. You just take out your Wild Growth Walkers for Harpooners in that matchup. Deputies can still be okay if you can protect them with Shalai and whatnot. And maybe bring in some vetoes if you're afraid of the Planeswalkers. That's pretty much it there. So like 2 here, maybe 3 of these. Replace Wild Growth Walkers. And probably like maybe 1 Deputy or the God Eternal if you think they're going to counter it. Stuff like that. Mono U and U white aggro. Not mono U, mono white. Mono blue is something we should probably consider, but mono blue, quick recap. Harpooners, probably vetoes you could, and Lyra definitely. It's like similar to that other sideboards we've been doing, but pretty much Lyra and Harpooners will win you the mono blue matchup straight up. Just sacrifice, like, you know, God Eternals, the stuff that's really slow and dirtily. Knight of Autumns are great against mono blue too. We're probably like slightly favored against mono blue with how much interrupt, and Time Raveler just wins us that matchup. So just probably sideboard out Walkers for some interaction with Harpooners, and you'll be okay there. And yeah, mono white, mono blue white. So that's a thing. You probably just want to, you could bring in Lyras. I'm not sure if they'd be super useful, but your main board's already so good, you don't need to make a lot of adjustments there. Wild Growth can win you the ground game pretty easily, make it so you can block early, and then you just grind them out. I don't even know if I'd make sideboard changes versus mono white. All of your stuff's so good against it. Yeah, I mean, if you think they're going to bring in counter spells and you want to counter their counter, you probably can't because they're bringing in vetoes too, so I don't know. It's tough. Maybe Time Wipes. Time Wipes could be okay, but could also be really expensive with Tide Taker or other Afterlife effects that kind of leave them with a board anyway, and then you're left with nothing. or creature in your hand. So just play well. Nexus, you probably take out this god. You probably trim like some of the slower stuff. Maybe one Crassus. Maybe you probably sideboard out the walkers, and you just put in stuff like vetoes, and I'd probably just say vetoes and just try to smash them real quick. Try to resolve this and protect it against Nexus. You'll be okay. Tamir Wreck is the same thing as Nexus, but you can bring in Harpooners to contest Niv also. So like you just have more tech against that deck than you do the normal Nexus deck. And you probably just take out walkers for Harpooners, and Dovins, find room for it somehow. Probably take out the God Eternal, maybe one Hydroid. That's usually my go-to to make room for other options. And that's pretty much it. You don't want to bring in Lyra because they're just going to untap with Niv and then go ham and just deal 5 damage to Lyra anyway. So there's that. I think that's pretty much most of the meta. If you guys have any questions about the meta, you can always feel free to, in regards to like what you would need sideboarding for and stuff, you can just ask in the comments below, and I'll try to respond the best I can if a new meta develops and whatnot. So I'll go for that. So there are also like a lot of options we could have for the deck, like cards that didn't quite make the first cut could make the second cut, like if we make adjustments to the deck. One of these, my favorite one, is probably Spark Double. He can come in as a copy of a creature or planeswalker, and then it's not legendary if it was legendary. So you can have like extra Vivians, you can have a Mystic. He can come in as a Mystic and counter something, or you can come in as a second Shalai, and then everything has hexproof, including Shalai. So you just untouchable by red. I want to make room for this. I don't know what I would cut though. I don't know what I would cut. Probably the God Eternal or like one Hydroid, probably one Mystic, since this can come in as a Mystic. But I've been liking the Mystic so much, I don't know. It's a tough cut. And like hurting the curve here by trimming like a 2-drop could really mess with the deck a lot. So, and I like Time Ravelers. I like the Vivians. I want to run more copies of that, but I can't because there are just only so many copies to the deck. So maybe take your least favorite card here, trim it, and then put in a Spark Double. That's what I would do. So some other cards we can consider. Second God Eternal might be okay too, but I think that would take the spot of Spark Double, so I'm not so sure about that. It's just that he's so explosive. He won me a crazy game. Maybe we'll do the clip at the end of this video to demonstrate, but it was insane. It was an insane board state, but he ended up winning me the game, so I don't know. It's really good. We've got the Wanderer as well for a Phoenix answer for red, so they can't burn us. Also, the Wanderer could be really cool with Spark Double, making it so that nothing could do damage to anything non-combat, and then you just get a bigger field than your opponent, and they can't win because they have to punch through with combat damage. And if they have a board wipe, you can potentially protect it with a Mystic. You really have an infinite amount of Mystics because you can -3 them, and just -3 the Mystics, and put them back into your hand and protect against another board wipe. You can even expand it to Fairy, casting it to be able to -3 it again if you really think that your opponent might be able to punch through with a board wipe. So really cool, really good. But I do like the idea of a Wanderer in the sideboard. I don't know what I would cut for it. Maybe we don't need 3 Harpooners. We probably don't need 4 Vetoes. That can probably trim down to 1 for something else like the Wanderer. And maybe we could trim a Tamiyo too, I'm not sure yet, or just take those out. Tristani was brought up before when we were talking about the Sultai sideboard. And we also have Dimir Control. It's not really popular, but it is a list. And sometimes they run Eldest Reborn, so like Tamiyo is really good against that too. So it's kind of up in the air, you know, it's hard to make the calls there. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, this list is pretty decent. I think we've gone over just about everything now. This video is probably way too long. But I hope it helped. I hope you enjoy the list if you go to try it. If you want to see me playing this list, I'll probably be playing it off and on throughout the week. Yeah, If there are any updates to the list, I'll of course update the Deck Hub link, which will be linked below, which will also be linked to the builds page and everything. It's all going to be below the stream. If you have any more questions, and it's not in the descriptions or whatever else, feel free to ask either in the comments on YouTube or on my stream. I stream just about every day from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific, to be specific. And yeah, thanks for checking out the video.